in the meantime, let's bring into the conversation right now our friend, retired Marine intelligence officer, national security analyst, and co-host of the Strat podcast, Hal Kempfer, joining us. Hal, good to see you. Thanks for being with us. You know, you and I were kind of talking offline about what does success for the Israeli campaign look like? And if we could maybe talk about some barometers or measurements of how the campaign has gone and whether or not it can be called successful right now, because you sent this over to me that one of these major Hamas strongholds in northern Gaza has been completely routed by Israel.
Andrew, that would be Jabalia refugee camp, and it has been basically cleared, according to the IDF. They went in there, they cleared it. As you know, there's been fierce fighting there well, since the war began. It was a Hamas stronghold, one of the last really, really difficult Hamas strongholds in the northern Gaza area. And they announced they took it. Now, it didn't get a whole lot of news. I don't know if everybody understands the significance of that. But what it does is it sends message to Hamas. And the message is that your strong points, if you will eventually fall. You know, those areas that you think you're going to be able to hold out indefinitely until this thing's over, they're not going to make it. And they're in the north. They're all over the north. They're in the south now. They've surrounded a number of key compounds. They're into literally downtown areas of Khan Yunis and other areas around there. And so for Hamas, this was a big signal. That may be why Israel is now opening the door where they previously had said there wasn't much that could happen. They're now opening the door for hostage negotiations, basically saying, let's maybe have a ceasefire for a week, and maybe we'll get a few dozen Israeli hostages out. That's kind of the offer that's on the table.
Okay.
As you've heard, Hamas is saying, stop fighting, stop doing everything, and then we'll think about it. And of course, for Israel, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, Hal, let's talk about this pretty big report today in Axios that was reported exclusively by Barak Ravid. The headline, Israel offers Hamas a one-week pause in fighting as part of a new hostage deal. It goes on to say that Israel is offering to pause the fighting in Gaza for at least 1 week as part of a new deal to get Hamas to release more than 36 hostages that the terror group is holding here. Of course, Hal, you and I were talking just yesterday about this meeting that's taking place with CIA Director Bill Burns. He met Monday with the Qatari Prime Minister and the head of Israel's Mossad spy agency in Warsaw to kind of jumpstart all of these negotiations. And I think this is really interesting. I want to put up some tweets here from the Prime Minister's office there in Israel. This is last night. Take a look at this. That Prime Minister Netanyahu and his wife, Sarah, met this evening with representatives of the families of the hostages and listened attentively to their difficulty and pain. The Prime Minister reiterated his commitment to bring about the release of all of the hostages back home. It goes on to say, Netanyahu told the families, we are committed, and I am personally committed to the release of all of the hostages. Rescuing them is the highest mission. In response to a question from one of those present, the Prime Minister said, quote, will I succeed? I can guarantee you one thing, we are not stopping. So I thought that was kind of interesting to juxtapose that meeting last night, Hal, with the news we're getting today about a potential pending hostage deal in the works here.
Well, Andrew, one of the things that Israel's dealing with is they haven't uncovered a lot of hostages, and by that I mean rescued them by traditional military means. There haven't been a lot of successful, in fact, there haven't been recently any successful hostage rescue operations. And so they're kind of going back and looking at, well, maybe we can negotiate this and maybe we can, it's a balancing act. It's not all one thing, despite the rhetoric tending to be a little bit extreme on, saying we're going to go all in on war, or what Hamas says is extreme on, well, pretty much everything Hamas says is extreme. That there is room for negotiation. And I think for the families, they want to give hope. And the hope is that maybe your family members will be part of that 36. Maybe it will get extended longer and they can get more out. Obviously, what Israel's looking at is trying to get the most number of hostages out in the time they have without giving up their advantages on the battlefield. And And it's not it's not an all or nothing proposition. It's a linear thing where you have to kind of look at where you are, and you have to be able to move this way or that way in order to do it. And just frankly, I would say after that horrible situation where they accidentally or mistakenly fired on and killed three Israeli hostages that were trying to repatriate themselves with Israeli forces. And then, of course, the questions looming over this attack or this shooting at a Christian church where a Christian mother and daughter were killed by a sniper,
Yeah.
ostensibly an Israeli sniper. All of this puts a lot of pressure on Netanyahu to try and find another way to get the hostages home. And I think what we're seeing is that other way. They're trying
Okay.
to explore what they can do because they're just simply not getting in there and rescuing the hostages. And we talked about this, and I certainly believe they're making every attempt to do that. It's just a very difficult battlefield.
Yeah. Hal, does your point you just made underline the fact that Israel, we know, is putting their cards on the table? That's the reporting we have first. We don't know what Hamas has put on the table or whether or not Hamas will accept what Israel has put on the table here.
Well, based on what based on what they've been saying, they're not putting any cards on the table right now.
Okay.
But it's tough to say. This is the thing with hostage negotiations. We cover it, we talk about it, but these negotiations are always done in secrecy, and there's a lot of imposed secrecy and security on it just because of the delicate situation of all these negotiations. They are saying things that they do not want to have to explain in public. In fact, doing any public negotiations is always fraught with peril. Even if it's in business, it's fraught with peril. You want to be in the room, you want to be talking privately, you want to be putting out possible concessions on the table, and you never want to completely show your cards. And you want to find out as much as you can about what the other side's position is. That's what they're doing. We're
Okay.
hearing some things, obviously. I think part of the public, the public proposition, if you will, on a ceasefire, is context. It's setting the stage, if you will. It's constellating around the negotiation itself.
Okay. Hal, want to also discuss with you this new objective mission from the Defense Department, a score of nations signing on to this because essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seems like the Red Strait there is closed for business because of all these attacks by Houthi rebels coming from Yemen. Our friend at Politico, Lara Seligman, she tweeted this: 19 nations have actually signed on to the new maritime task force focused on countering Houthi attacks on commercial shipping. It's titled Operation Prosperity Guardian, but most of them don't want to put their names to the move, according to a senior administration official telling Lara that today. Hal, what is your opinion on this? Do you think it's going to have the deterrent effect? It's been created, and that's its intent, obviously. And are you surprised more nations haven't signed on? Apparently, Lara's reporting suggests many more have signed on, but they're not saying so publicly here. And whether or not these Houthi rebels will get the message.
Well, Andrew, from what I've heard, and you're right, they're not releasing all the names of the countries participating. But from what I've heard, a lot of nations have. Not surprisingly, a number of NATO nations that historically have worked with the U.S. in the Gulf of Aden, in that region before, dealing with Somali pirates. A lot of those countries have stepped up and said, yes, we'll put a naval presence down there. Will it deter the Houthis? I think right now they're putting a presence down there that will actually protect the ships that move through the Red Sea and through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, because that is a vital sea lane, and we've been talking about that. I think literally since October 7th, we've been talking about if this thing expands, if it goes regional, what major choke points, if you will, maritime choke points and international trade choke points could be threatened. Of course, this was one of the ones we focused on immediately because of the situation there with the Houthi rebels, which are also backed by Iran, the same Iran that backs Hezbollah and, of course, backs Hamas. So we're looking at this. We're looking at ships that have been hit. We're looking at missiles and drones that are being used. And we know Iran has put a lot of missiles and drones into the Houthi area of Yemen. And so right now, I don't know if it's so much deterrence. There is some deterrent value, but this is actual physical protection. These are ships that can shoot down missiles and drones. Right now, you've got a lot of ships, a lot of commercial ships. You got Maersk. Yesterday, you had British Petroleum. You have a number of truly major commercial carriers around the world who have said, we're not going to send our ships through there. And the maritime insurance industry has made it very clear. If you go through there, the premiums are sky high
Yeah.
if they'll cover you. So for Egypt, for example, which controls the Suez Canal, owns the Suez Canal, I should say, this is catastrophic.
Okay.
I've heard they've already lost 2.5% of their annual revenue
Wow.
just in what's happened recently. To give you an idea of how big the impact is, and so there's a lot of countries I think that are going to weigh in heavily. I think there's going to be a number of countries from the Middle East that will weigh in on this, that will send their ships in. For obvious reasons, they probably don't want to advertise it at this point.
I see.
They may say something later. Interestingly, the Seychelles, which is not a place you'd expect to have a major Navy force. I've actually worked with maritime security forces, maritime security personnel from the Seychelles. The Seychelles stepped right up and said, we'll send a presence there, which is very interesting. For them, that is a major contribution. They don't have a huge maritime, they have a huge maritime responsibility, but they don't have a lot of assets that they can put towards this. And I think that's a very substantial contribution by a smaller country that's in the region saying, hey, look, this is that important to us.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was encouraging.
Yeah, and Hal, we've seen the maps. I've seen some maps today suggesting that a lot of this traffic is just turning around and having to go on this very, very long detour around the Horn of Africa and the Cape of Good Hope here. And this kind of just distills all of this so well. Lucas Tomlinson tweeting this today. Over 100 attacks on U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria over the past 2 months. Over 100 attacks on international shipping in the Red Sea, all launched by Iran's proxy forces. So, Hal, while we have you, we just have one more topic that we want to get to that we have discussed with you in the past. It has to do with Capitol Hill there, a live now look at the U.S. Capitol in Washington. And so before senators leave for the Christmas holiday, we got the news today, Hal, that Senator Tommy Tuberville, the Republican from Alabama, who has withheld all of these military promotions in the hundreds over his objection to this abortion policy there at the Pentagon, finally lifting them, 11 of them, and so now four-star generals getting that promotion. He withheld them on that front. And so it was confirmed today by voice vote. Tuberville wanted a roll call, but it was confirmed by voice vote. And so the military promotion holds by Tuberville that have gone on for months finally over going into 2024, Hal.
Thank goodness. This is the thing. This is general officers, and a lot of times they say, oh, you have acting, you have acting. The Marine Corps, the service that I served in proudly, the Marine Corps, had a real problem in that we were running out of four-star generals at headquarters Marine Corps that could actually fill the billet. And so we needed to get somebody, and that was one of the first things that they did was they got, not today, but earlier they got basically our deputy commandant, our assistant commandant confirmed so he could be in acting. But there's a number of billets out there, a number of positions where they literally need to be in that billet, and particularly when you work on the joint and combined side. And by combined, I mean coalition, international. You need to be at parity in rank with your international counterparts. And I say this having worked coalition stuff going back a very long time. There's a reason why we should put a colonel to a colonel, a brigadier general to a brigadier general, a full general to a full general, for parity purposes, for a lot of command purposes. The other thing is, if they're not confirmed, then they can't move their families.
Right.
So you could send somebody off to fill the job, but they might have to do a move around the country or around the world in order to do that job. They can't put their families, and we've missed the window where they could, we try to do it in the summer.
Okay.
So their kids can start school and things like that. Well, we missed that window. So this is still going to ripple for quite some time.
Okay.
Across the board.
Yeah, and I just might add, I want to put up this tweet from Capitol Hill reporter at HuffPost, Igor Bobich. He says the Tuberville blockade fully over with the Pentagon abortion travel policies still in place. That's the reality of it, Hal, is it not?
It is. Well, I'm going to say this. I have a feeling there's more monkey wrenches in the Senate that are going to get tossed in there to gear up the works. Okay. I don't think this is completely done.
Okay.
I would love to be optimistic and say this is over with and we're not going to see this again. But I just have a feeling that something's going to pop up maybe next month or in the months to come, and we might be looking at something maybe next summer in the same situation, similar situation, I should say.
All right. Hal Kempfer, as always, we appreciate your insight into these international matters, and we'll talk soon.